Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of the Java Winter Coding Camp by Plano East Computer Science Club. Our schedule for today is going over the homework, covering string methods, arrays, loops, and we'll have a Kahoot at the end, just like yesterday, and this one will be mandatory. Tomorrow, these are some of the things we'll be going over, but you don't have to worry about them just yet. So now let's do the homework review. In this homework assignment, you're basically given this variable called a number grade, and then you had to print out the grade that the student got. And about half of you used only if statements and the other half used else if. The goal was for you guys to use else if. And the reason you want to use else if in particular is because if you only want to have one thing displayed, if you have multiple if statements and you're dealing with things that are more complex, it's possible that that condition that you're checking for that variable you're checking for meets multiple conditions and you get multiple things displayed instead of one thing. But with else if, you don't have to worry about that because if all the other stuff above it is not true, then it will check this current else if statement. So this is a screenshot of what one of the students' code looked like, and it's correct. You can see they're checking if the number grade is greater than or equal to 90, in which case it's an A. Then if it's between 80 and 89, it's a B, 70 and 79, it's a C, and F, that would be everything below 70. And they used an else statement for that. So that's very nice. And a lot of your solutions look like this, so that's good. But you could actually make it even shorter. Like this is all you need over here. This code also works and it does the exact same thing. And the reason it works and it's shorter is because in this first if statement, it checks whether number grade is greater than or equal to 90. In order for the code to even come to this condition and try to evaluate it, this will only happen if number grade is less than 90. Because let's say number grade is 100. 100 is greater than or equal to 90, so it prints A and it's done. It doesn't go through any of these. But if number grade is less than 90, it's going to come here. And the reason I'm saying this is because this and statement at the end, this extra condition, is not necessary because we know for a fact if this is false, number grade is less than 90. So that's why we don't need to check if number grade is greater than or equal to 80 and number grade is less than or equal to 89 because we already know it's less than 89 since we're using else if statements and the number grade over here is not greater than or equal to 90. So this is a shorter version of the code. Yeah. And this code over here works. This is just a shorter version. And we can do this because of else ifs. I just wanted to show that. So if you did the homework and got it correct, good job. And if not, we'll be giving 2 more assignments after the end of this lesson.
My homework looks a bit different than yours, but the code works.
Yeah. There's probably like a million different ways you can code it. Everybody's code will look differently.
Yeah, the interesting thing about programming is that there's not one solution to every problem. And in programming, there's many solutions, and the fact that there's many solutions means like you can work problems many different ways.
Yeah, so somebody said they assigned a character called result and changed it if the if statement is true. That also works. So if you tested it for multiple different values and it worked for you, then that's good. Okay. And now we'll be covering string methods. So do you remember these data types from yesterday? We have short, int, long, float, double, char, boolean, and string. You see here that for most of these, basically all of these except string, they start with lowercase letters. And that's because they're something called primitive data types. All they do is store a value. With string, the reason that's capitalized, the S over here, is because it's a class. It's not a primitive data type, it's a class. So if you remember from yesterday when we were coding in REPL, we had class main at the very top. Just like we have class main, the people who made Java created a class called string. And just like how we have a main function inside of our class, those people who made the string method made a bunch of other functions. Maybe they made a function to count the length of the string. Yesterday, Madhu also showed that you can use the equals method to check if two strings are equal or not. So these people who made Java made a string class and they gave it a bunch of functions that we can use. And that's why string over here is in blue because it's different from the other data types. These are primitive data types. String is a class. And because it's a class, it has functions associated with it. You don't have to worry too much about functions because we'll be writing our own functions tomorrow and covering it in depth. But for now, all you have to know is that functions carry out certain tasks and they give you a value back. So Here's an example. Here's the format that you would use to call string functions. First, you'd have the string variable name, then the dot over here, function name, and then you pass in whatever you want inside. And these are called arguments. And the reason there's an asterisk is the arguments are the information that you give to a function so it can do its task, but not all functions have arguments. And you've already used functions actually, whether you realize it or not. System.out.println is a function, and the arguments it takes is whatever you want to display on the console. Another function you used yesterday was the string.equals function. Remember, Madhu showed that in an if statement, you were checking if two strings are equal or not. In that case, the argument was a second string that you were checking. So we're going to go more in depth into a couple of string methods and take a look at how to code them afterwards. So here's the length method. And what it gives you is an int because it's giving you how long the string is. And that's why it's an int, not a float or a character. It's an int. So over here we have string message equals hope you're having fun with an exclamation mark. And then we can say message dot length. And you can see this function does not have any arguments. We do not pass anything in. We just put parentheses and that's it. And this will give us an int that describes the length of the string. So the length of this string would be like 4 plus 1 for the space. And then this is like another 6 characters, 7, and so on. And it would just tell you how long that string is. There's another string method that Madhu covered, which checks whether two strings are equal or not, and this gives you a boolean. Remember, booleans store true or false values. So over here we have string message equals hi, and then boolean same equals message dot equals hi. In this case, hi and hi are equal, so message dot equals will give you a boolean that is equal to true. And that's what equals does. Contains is similar to equals. You have to give it a string argument and it will tell you whether a string contains a particular substring. So in this case, we have message equals how are you doing today? And we're checking if message dot contains R. Message does contain R right over here next to the how. So this will return a boolean that is true. We have char at, and this is used to this gives you a character. So what you do over here is you specify the position that you want the character from, and it gives you that character. One important thing to note is that indexing in Java starts at 0. So the computers start counting at 0 and then they go up. So if you ask the computer, hey, what's in position 1 of message, it's not going to say H. H is not the first, H is the first thing, but it's in position 0. I is in position 0. So that's why when we say message.char at 1, it gives us the I, because the letter at position 1 is this I over here. And that's what char at does. It just gives you the character at a position. The position numbering starts at 0. Then we have replace. As the name suggests, it replaces all occurrences of text with some other text. So let's say you had a string like hi there and you wanted to replace hi with hello. You would use the replace function. And then substring gives you a section of a string. Let's say you want a section of a string from position 0 to position 2. You could use substring to do that, and it will give you part of a string. So that's what substring does. So here's here's the format once more: string variable dot function name, and then we have our arguments. And now we're going to go ahead and do some hands-on examples. So go ahead to repl.it, like I am. I'll share the link in the chat. And I'll give everybody like half a minute to get there and sign in as well. If you still need more time to sign in, just let us know into the chat. We'll go over that
I have
together.
a question.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of ifs and if you have like an else if, is there any difference between them or is it just like the same thing, but it's shorter?
If you have a lot of ifs, the thing is, if your variable meets all of those, for whichever ifs your variable meets those conditions, it will print it out. So if you have temperature is equal to 80, and you have an if to check if temperature is greater than 10, and you have another if to check if temperature is greater than 5, it's going to execute the code in both of those if statements.
Oh,
If you
okay.
used an else if, it'd only do if temperature is greater than 10.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good question.
Because I thought it was like in Scratch or like in JavaScript there are like loops you can use and it keeps on repeating the code.
Loops and if statements are different. We'll be going over loops
Okay.
later today.
I have a question about else if statements.
Okay.
So mine's a basic question, but how would you write an else if statement?
Yeah, so they're similar to if statements. The way that you'd write them is you just put the else keyword before the if. So this is what it looks like over here.
Oh. Also, another question I have is for when I tried doing the system out println,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't work properly when I tried to run the code. All it gave me was there was no symbol for the else if statement if it was true.
If you can share your repl link in the chat, I can privately message you about your
Okay.
about your issue.
Yeah. If you guys have any like specific errors you're getting in REPL, the biggest thing you can do to receive help is put your link in the chat and one of the officers will be monitoring it to help you out. You can private message them as well. Okay, where was I here? Yeah, so I'm assuming everybody's at REPL.it now and they're signed in. So we're going to go ahead and click on this new REPL button over on the left. And if you have the menu collapsed, you're going to have to expand it by clicking on these three lines over here in the top left corner. There's this new REPL button right underneath your username. We'll click on that, select Java. And then for this REPL, we can call it string methods. So call it string methods and click create REPL. So now it's created the REPL for us. We have our code and we have the console. I'll just hide that. Go ahead and delete the code on line 3 because we won't be using it. The system.out.println hello world. And if anybody needs more time, just make sure to type into the
What
chat.
is it called again?
What is what called?
Like the code,
Source code?
not source code, but like the name of this.
Java?
No,
He's
like
talking about
the.
like what to name the REPL.
Oh, it's called string methods.
Okay.
Yeah, here. Okay. So we're just gonna go through all of the examples that we saw on the slides with some hands-on coding. So I'll just say string message, or I'll just say text to keep it short. String text equals hello, how are you? Something like that. The first thing that we're going to test out is the length of the string. Well, actually, first, I'm going to delete this and make it shorter. I'm just going to make it hello. So you should have string text equals hello. And now we're going to say system.out.println, and we're going to type in text because that's the name of our string variable. We want to call the length function. So before you call the function, you have to put a period followed by the function name and then parentheses. And you can see REPLs have been offering this auto suggestion, so you can just click on it. And remember, you have to end statements with semicolons. I think that's why there were a lot of syntax errors yesterday as well as in the homework. So make sure to end the statements with semicolons, except for if statements. And now if we run this, you'll see that it'll print out the length of the string. So actually, before I run it, how long is this string? How many characters are in it? And you can type it into the chat. What do you think this code will print out? 5, yep. Not 4, 5, because hello has 5 letters in it. So system.out.println text.length will display 5. And you can see it did that right over here. Okay, so that's text.length. It's pretty basic. And you can see we didn't put anything inside these parentheses because it doesn't have any parameters. The next one we'll look at is equals. We'll go over that one quickly because Madhu covered it yesterday. But we just say text.equals. And now we can say something like, well, actually, I'm going to copy this and paste it here. Okay, so we'll say text.equals. And inside, we're going to say something like hi. So we'll pass in hi. And this does have an argument. That's why we put stuff inside the parentheses for the equals. And hello is not equal to hi, that's why it said false. If I type in hello here instead, it's going to say true. And that's an example with equals. The next one we're going to go through is contains. Because contains checks if a string contains another string, we'll make our text longer. So we'll say, hello, how are you? Something like that. And then we can, for this example, let's change it up a bit. Let's do an if statement to review if statements. So we'll check whether text contains contains a question mark, because if it contains a question mark, then that means the person's asking a question, and we can say you just asked a question. So to do that, we'll say if text dot contains, and you can see over here it's also saying that the parameter it requires is a string. So if text dot contains question mark, then what we're going to do is we can just print out system.out.println you asked a question. Else, so if text does not contains the question mark, it's going to come over here to the else, and over here we can just print system.out.println you did not ask a question. And we can go ahead and run this. Now, I have a question actually while this is running. Why were we able to use text.contains question mark inside an if statement over here? Why did it work as a condition? And why would something like text.length give us an error? If you run this right now with text.length, it'll give us an error, even though it's not showing any red over here. But if you do text.contains, you can see it worked fine, and it said you asked a question. So does anybody want to take a guess? You guys can type into the chat. Why does text.contains work inside an if statement for the condition? Why does text.length not work? Okay, so there's no responses. So my first question to make it easier is, what does text.length give us? What type of data does it give us?
The number of characters in the string.
Yeah, but what
Wait,
data
I
type is it?
have answer. Can I answer? Can I answer?
Sure.
Text dot contains is you're containing you're just specifying what is inside the things that are inside the like text, while length is just how long is the text. So like it's going to
Yeah,
have an
the length is an integer and the contains is a boolean.
Yeah, that's the answer I was looking for. So text.length gives you an integer back, right? That because it's telling you how long the string is, that gives you an integer. You can't put integers directly into an if statement because it expects a boolean. So if you put like if 3, that's an error. It has to be a boolean, like if 3 is greater than 2, that's a boolean. Text.contains gives you a boolean for whether or not the text contains this question mark. So that's why we can put text.contains inside the condition for an if statement, because it evaluates to either true or false, but we cannot put something like text.length inside. Okay, so this is an example with text.contains. I'll comment that out. And how do I do a multi-line comment? Because I have multiple lines of code that I want to comment out. I don't want to delete them. Does anybody remember how we do a multi-line comment in Java? Yep, that's correct. We type a slash, then an asterisk, and then an asterisk and a slash. So you can see it's commented out. And you guys can refer to the link after today. That's why I'm commenting it out instead of deleting it. Okay, so that's contains. Let's do caret. So I'll move this down over here so it's easier for us to see. Or actually, I'll just type over here. Okay, so if I do system.out.println text.char@1, what does char@ do again? Does anybody remember? Yeah, I'll go back to the slides. Char@ gives us the character, the position. So what do you think text.char@1 will print out? Yep, E is the answer. And it's E, not H, because like I said, computers start counting at 0. So this H is actually 0, the E is 1, then it's 2, 3, 4, the space is 5, this lowercase h is 6, and so on. So that's why when we say text.char at 1 and we run this, it's going to display E, not H. Okay. And once again, because this is an int, we can go ahead and store it inside. Because it's a character, we can store this in a character variable. So we can say that char c equals text.char at 1, and that works. But if we had int c, that's not going to work. So you want to make sure that you know what arguments, basically what you have to put inside these functions, as well as what values they give you. That way you don't run into any errors. Okay, the next one we're going to go over is the replace function. This one's pretty useful. So let's say I have this text over here with hello, how are you? And I want to say instead, hi, how are you? To do that, I can say string new string equals text dot replace, and I'll put parentheses, a semicolon at the end. And inside, I'm going to replace hello with hi. And I should also print this out. So system.out.println new string. If we run this, it will print, hi, how are you? Yeah, you can see that right there. Hi, how are you? Because we took this original string called text, we replaced hello with hi. If we had multiple hellos, like a hello here and a hello here, it will replace all hellos with hi. So if we run this now, it'll say hi, how, hi are you? Which doesn't make any sense, but it's just for the purpose of this example. If you wanted to replace only one thing, you could say replace first. And if you search up like Java documentation, and you click on this link by Oracle, you can see they have really great documentation. So if you search up string Java documentation, you can find a whole list of functions. We're just going over some of the main ones you'll use pretty commonly. Yeah, but this is just an example with text.replace. We have two more we're going to go through. One of them is substring. Here, let me type it up over here.
Ishan, can you look at chat?
Yeah. Okay, so substring is a function that gives us a section of a string. And over here for substring, we say where we want to start from and where we want to end. And we take the string in between. We take that part of the string, and that's what it gives us. So to do this example, we'll say string part of string equals text dot substring parentheses and semicolon. It's red right now because it wants us to provide some parameters. So inside we'll say 0, because remember, it's Java starts counting at 0. So this h over here is technically 0. And let's say we just wanted to extract the word hello out of the string. How many characters does hello have in it? How long is hello? Yep, it's 5 characters. So if you've been taking notes so far, this may be a good thing to write down in case you get confused. Java and other programming languages start their counting at 0. And for the substring method in Java, when you're providing 2 ints over here, the first int is where you're starting from. So 0 is this h over here. It's going to start at h and will include the h. But the second int will not be included. For example, if I said 0 to 5, it's not going to include this space over here. Let me make this easier to visualize. So this is position 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5. Oh, I forgot 2. So if I say text.substring 0 to 5, it's going to only take hello, which technically to us looks like 0 to 4. This 5 over here, which is a space, you can see the 5 and the space line up. This space is not going to be included in our substring. And this is the proper term that we would use to describe this is exclusive. So the second argument for text.substring is exclusive. It does not include the 5 in our substring. So once again, to reiterate, we have hello over here. We are taking a substring from 0 to 5. So this is 0, the h, the 5 is at the space over here, but it does not include the space. So that's just something you should write down and keep note of because you'll also be seeing it in Kahoot. So now if we do system.out.println part of string and run this, it will print out hello. And there it is, it says hello. One more thing we're going to look at with substring is another form of substring. So this is something that's called substring is an overloaded function. We're not going to cover what that means, but in the future, if you're interested in Java and learning more about it, we'll give you some more information that you can use to look into. But the substring method is overloaded, which means there's multiple versions of it. So one version that we just saw is where we take a substring from one index to another index, from 0 to 5. The second version we're going to look at, I'll just say second substring, is going to be where we only pass in one argument. And we're going to type in text.substring 6. We're going to see what it does, and then you guys can take a guess at what you think this function, this version of substring does. I'll comment this out. Okay, so here it is, and it's displaying second substring over here. It says how, hello, hello, how are you? How, hello, hello, are you? What do you take a look at this original string, which was hello, how, hello, hello, are you? And take a look at this one over here that it displayed. And then take a look at what we did. We said text.substring 6. What do you think? You can take a wild guess, but what do you think this version of substring does? Yep, that's the correct answer. So one of the students typed into the chat as it takes everything from the 6 and after it. So if I continue numbering, this h is 6, that's 7, that's 8, that's 9. And over here we said text.substring 6. So it takes everything from the 6 all the way to the end of the string. So that's also useful to know about substrings. You have two different options. You have the option where you specify a starting position and an end position. And you have the option where you just specify a starting position and it automatically goes to the end. So this is like the lazier version. If you're too lazy to find where the end of the string is and how long it is, this is the quicker option, this version of substring over here.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I put mine just like that, but I got hello, not how hello, hello are you?
Did you type in 0,6?
No,
Are you printing part of string or second substring? I was in this latest example, I was printing second substring.
yeah, that's what I did.
Okay, yeah. So once again, if you can just send the link to your REPL in the chat so one of the officers can take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, so once again, if you guys are running into errors with the REPL, it'd be quicker if you shared your link in the chat. Okay, the last example we're going to go with for string methods is index of. And we'll take a look at, oh, it's actually not on here, but yeah, I'll go over it anyways. So what index of does is it gives you the starting position where a string is found. So let's say I wanted to find where the word how is in this text variable over here. So we know that how is located at position 6. That's where it starts. You can see over here, we have how, and it lines up with position 6. So what text.indexOf does is gives us that position. It tells us where in the string the word how is. And this is pretty useful information. So we could say like int where is how equals text.indexOfHow. And then we could say system.out.println where is how, run that, and it will print out 6 because the word how is located at position 6. And here it is. If you had multiple instances of how, so if you had a string filled with how, like how, it will give you the first location. Just like with the substring method, there is another version of index of where you can also provide another integer for where you want to start looking after, but we're not going to cover that in too much detail. Once again, if you're interested, you can take a look at the Java documentation. But that's something you may want to know exists if you have a string with multiple hows and you want to find a house specifically after position 7. there's another version of the index of method that exists that allows you to do that. Yep. But this is our review of string methods. Are there any questions about what any of them do, how to use them, anything like that? And now you can unmute yourselves and ask questions. If there are no questions, there's two quick things I wanted to cover. One is concatenation, which is basically adding something onto a string. So for simplicity, I'm just going to delete all this inside text and I'm going to write hello. So I have string text equals hello. And I can say text equals text plus Bob and then period. So what do you guys think text will be after I run this? Do you think there'll be an error or do you think something will happen? And if so, what will happen? We have string text equals hello. And then we're saying text equals text plus this string over here. Okay, so we'll take a look at what happens. We'll print out text. So it printed out hello Bob. So it printed out hello Bob because what it's doing is it took this, what is the value of text initially on line 3? When we created the variable text, what was its value? It was hello. Yep. And the way that programming languages work, when you have equal signs like this, like in math, if you said x equals x plus 3, if you did this in math class, that may look weird and it's probably wrong. But in programming, the computers don't care. They take whatever's on the right side of the equal sign and they just plug it into whatever's on the left. So what the right side looks like right now is hello, which is what text equals, right? That's what text stores. It's a variable that stores hello. And then we're adding on, remember the operators Madhu covered yesterday? We're adding on the word Bob followed by a period. So that's why over here it prints out hello Bob. So this is how you add strings to other string. Like I could have string A equals A, string B equals B, string C equals C, string ABC equals A plus B plus C. And now if I print out ABC, it will print out the letters A, B, and C because I took each of these strings, combined them together, and printed out ABC. So that's how you concatenate strings together. We're going to take a look at how to add integers and doubles to strings and other things like that. So right now, if I said string text equals 3, that's going to give me an error because this is an integer. If I run this, I'll get an error. But if I want to give a string a value, yeah, you can see it gave me an error. So if I want to give a string and like I want to add an integer to a string, the way that I would do that is I'd say string equals string text equals empty quotations plus 3. And what this will do is it will not give us an error. So now text will contain 3. And if we do system.out.println text, it will display 3. Actually, I have a slide for this, so I'll go over it. Yeah, so if you want to add numbers to strings like int a equals 5, double b equals 3.5, one way we can do that is by saying string s equals empty quotations plus a. So now s will be 5 because a is 5. These are empty quotes. And remember, quotations signify that that's a string. So now it'll be 5 in quotes. If we did, the second option that we have is this over here. We could say string s equals double dot to string b, and now s is 3.5. So these are two different ways of taking something like an integer or a decimal and adding it onto a string. You can see one is obviously shorter than the other With this method, we just used empty quotes. Over here, we had to use this function called toString. And we'll go ahead and practice both of them. So I'll create a string variable and I'll make it empty. Actually, I'll say my number is. So we have our text over here, and if we run that, it's just going to display my number is. Yep, so we have string text equals my number is, followed by a colon, and then a space. So if we want to, let's say we had an integer variable. So I'll say int number equals 3. If I wanted to add this onto my text variable over here, I have two ways of doing it. We're going to practice the top one first. So we'll say text equals text. We will say text equals, we'll just say text equals this empty string plus number. And now if we print this out, it's going to print out 3. If I deleted this quotation over here and said text equals number, that's going to give me an error because text is a string, number is an integer, and you can't say a string equals an integer. But if I add these quotations and a plus sign, that will work. So that's the first method that was on the slide. We're going to practice the second method now. And this one uses a function. So what data type is number? It's an int. And what do ints store? Integers. Yeah. So just like how I said there's a class in Java called string, there's a class in Java called integer. And this integer class has a function called toString. So if you want to take something and you want to take an integer and make it a string, you say integer.toString, and then you put your int inside and it will magically make it a string. So we could say over here, I'll comment this part out. We could say text equals integer dot toString 5. And if we run this, it will print out 5. And remember, text is a string variable, 5 is an integer, but this doesn't give us an error because it's taking this integer 5, making it a string, and now text equals that string 5. You can see displayed 5 over here. So these are two ways of taking numbers, whether they're integers. This could also be a double. If this were a double, like double number equals 3.0, and we had number inside here. To make 3.0 a string, you can see this is red. We would say double dot toString. And now you can see the red has gone. We print that out, will work. If you have booleans, you use boolean dot toString. If you have characters, you say character dot toString. You kind of get the idea. If you have shorts, you say short dot toString. If you have longs, you say long dot toString, and so on. They all follow the same format. And this is how you convert integers, decimals, and those kind of things into a string. Are there any questions about that?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I put text equals integer dot to string 5,
Yeah.
but it gives me a compiler exit status 1.
Okay, if you could
Paste
please
your
share
link
your
in the
link with
chat.
us because I don't know what the specific error is or why it's happening.
Okay, I'll share my link. Okay, I put it in the chat.
Okay, I'll take a look at it.
Are there any other questions about how this works? If you're running into errors, it'd be better if you put into the chat. But if you have questions about what the code does, how it works, something like that, you can unmute yourself and ask.
Wait, so why do we have to have an empty quotation? Like, why can't we have something inside the quotation?
Yeah, we could have stuff inside the quotations. It's just going to get replaced anyways because we're saying text equals. So we're giving text a new value. So you can see over here, printed out 5. It's not going to print out this over here. If we wanted to maintain the original text, we'd say text equals text plus integer dot to string 5.
So
But I
it
keep it
doesn't.
simple. I just made it an empty string.
So it only like takes the thing what you put in like and on like the integer to string line.
Yeah, so it takes whatever is on the right side of the equal sign and puts it onto the variable on the left. So right now on the
Oh,
right
okay.
side, we have integer dot to string, which gives us a string that contains 5. If we had done, so I'm just going to type my number is, if we had said text equals text plus integer dot to string, the stuff on the right over here is going to be, it's going to be my number is, whoops, my number is, because that's what text contains. It's a variable that contains my number is. And then we're adding on integer dot to string 5, which is going to be 5. So now if we run this and print it out, it'll print my number is 5, because we're saying text equals text plus integer dot to string. And you can see that over here.
Oh, okay. So unless you put like text plus, it will just take what's like to the right of the equal sign.
Yeah.
It won't take anything else into
Yes.
account.
But if you did want to add on to your text variable, like this can get pretty lengthy. Like let's say you had a variable name that was really, really long. And now imagine every time you wanted to add something onto the end, you had to do that. Instead of doing that, you can use this sign plus equals. We weren't planning on covering this, but because you guys seem to want to know, this is actually something that's really useful. So instead of saying text equals text plus, you say text plus equals integer dot to string. And what this will do is we'll just add this on to the end. Okay, so don't get too confused by this. All it does, it just takes whatever's on the right and adds it on. It doesn't replace text value, it adds it on to text at the end. So that's why it says here, my number is 5. So now we don't have to say text equals text plus this. We can just say text plus equals that, and it's a lot shorter. That was a good question. So are there any other questions? Okay, then we'll go ahead and, do we want to have a break now or a little later?
I think we should have a break now. There's a lot of content we just covered.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll have a break now. You guys can come back at like 1:50, so that's 6 minutes. And if you have any questions, you could ask us.
Okay, now that it's 1:50, I'm gonna resume. So now we're gonna be talking about arrays. Arrays, essentially they store a collection of data. So remember how we have like ints to store individual numbers? Like we can have int number 1 equals 7. What an array can do is it can store multiple numbers, for example, and it can store multiple of the same data type, basically. So if you look at this example at the top, we have an array of integers because there are multiple integer numbers. And all of this can be stored into an array. And this array will store a collection of these integers, for example. And the second example I have below, these arrays can store a collection of strings additionally. They could store any data type, and they could store multiple of those single data types. And yeah, so now we can store a list of values. So for example, we can store a list of names, a list of animal names such as deer, moose, boars, a list of grades, a list of movies. You can store a list of anything. So the way we're going to create an array is this is going to be the format where we have our data type. And then I'll go into the specifics of this when we go into Replit. But just know that you will have your data type and then your variable name. And then you're going to say data type variable name equals new data type. And then you're going to specify the number of elements you want. And I'll show a few hands-on examples of this so that we don't get overwhelmed. So an example of this right here is we have our double, which is the data type, and then we have these brackets. So just note, you have to have these brackets because they indicate that you're using an array. So like, for example, if we don't have these brackets and we do like double decimal array equals new double, Java won't be able to read it. But Java will be able to read it if you include these brackets in there. So we're gonna have double these brackets, and these brackets will always contain nothing in them, like the first pair of brackets. So data type, these brackets, and then we have our variable name. Our variable name right here is called decimal array, and then we're gonna have our equal sign, and then we're gonna have the new, and then we're gonna have our data type again, which is double. And then here we're gonna have these brackets, but inside these brackets, we're gonna specify how many elements we want in our array. And as always, we want to end our lines with a semicolon. Unless we're working with if statements, then we don't want to have a semicolon at the end. And then what this will do is it will create an array of a double data type, and it will have 5 elements inside because here we specified that we wanted 5 total elements. So as you can see here, we have an array created of double data type called decimal array, and there are 5 spots in here, as you can see. Like this is our first spot, our second spot, third spot, fourth spot, fifth spot. And another example of creating an array that's not a double data type is we can create int arrays, for example. So here we have our data type of int, we have our brackets, our variable name called num array, our equal sign, the word new, we have our data type again, and then we have our brackets, and inside these brackets, we specified that we wanted 2 total elements. And then as always, we end with a semicolon. And here, as you can see, it creates an array of two spaces. Each space will contain an int. So here, both of them contain a 0. And as you can see, when I created a double array, all the values contained a 0.0. And that's called the default value of an array. Every data type has their own default value. So as you can see, when I created an int, the default value was a 0. So the default value for other data types, so we have int is 0, a double will create 0.0, a boolean will be initially false. Like, so if you create an array with full of booleans, it's going to be all false in the beginning. And then something special with string is that it will be filled with null. It won't be filled with the string null. It will just be filled with null. So what that means is null just means there's no reference. So another way to think about it is that it means literally nothing. And null is not a string. So that's something a bit more important to think about. Typically, when we create a string, we will have something enclosed within those quotation marks. But something special about string is that when you're creating a string, it's just going to be full of null values. And think I'm gonna go over creating some arrays in Replit right now. So if you can go over to Replit, and let's say you had your code above. So like if you had anything from above that Ishan had covered earlier, just make sure to comment that out instead of deleting it. And then go down below, and then we can start typing up our new code here. So we're going to create some arrays. So first example that we're going to do is create a int array. So int num array equals new int. And then remember, we have these brackets in the beginning, and we have our data type. Our variable name is right here. And then we have new int. And then remember the brackets, but this time we're going to have some values within those brackets. So here you can specify how many spaces you want in your array. So for example, I can indicate that I want 9 spaces. And then at the end, I'll have a semicolon. And if you run it, nothing will happen because all we're doing is creating an array, but we're not printing anything out. And we'll cover printing an array in a little type. I mean, in a few minutes. So actually, I'm going to go over a few more examples of creating arrays to make sure that we understand this, because arrays are a foundational concept in Java. So let's do string next. So string array equals new string, and then we specify how many placeholders we want in our string array. So here we can say we want 5 values in our string array. So remember, data type in the beginning, we have our brackets, and then our variable name, and then we have our equals new, and then we have our data type again, and then we have the number of spaces we want. So, and you can do this for any data type. If you have any questions, please type it into the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to continue on. So the next thing I'm going to go over is accessing the elements in an array. So I know I just said a few terms, and I'll clarify each term. So in this array down below, each of these values is called an element. So we have like 23, 14.5, 12.03, negative 1,235, and 0.0. So this, for example, could be a double array, and these could be the values within the double array. And each of these values, we call these elements in Java. And similarly to how Ishan covered indexes and strings, Java works the same way. Indexes start at 0. So if you look down below at 23.0, that's at index 0 because Java will start counting at 0. 14.5 is at index 1, 12.03 is at index 2, negative 1,235 is at index 3, and 0.0 is at index 4. But at index 5, there's nothing. And if you were to try to retrieve index 5, Java will give you an error. Yeah, so just like how I said, indexes will start at 0, and that's how Java counts. And yeah, and this is, for example, a double array. And these are these values. I will explain how to change the value in a double array, or any array in general. So in an array, when you want to access the value like at a certain index, you can use this method. So what this will do is you first provide the variable name. So in this case, we have decimal array. So that could be our variable name. And then we would indicate which index we want Java to retrieve. So we could, for example, do decimal array brackets 1, and then we can get our value of 14.5. Because remember, Java starts at 0, and 14.5 is at index 1. So I will go over a few examples of this in a little bit. So as you can see here, I have this array right here of 7, 11, 6, so on. And I have a few examples. So if I were to, so let's just call this array called number array. So the variable will be number array. And let's say we wanted to retrieve the value of 7 here. This is at index 0. So we would just call in number array of 0. And remember that you need to have these brackets. Otherwise, Java will not recognize what you're typing in. Here, there's only 8 indexes. So if you were to retrieve the place at index 9, Java will give you an error because there's nothing at index 9. Next example I'm going to go over is number array of 5. And this would return 45 because at index 5, we have our number 45. So for example, what would happen if I were to do number array at index 2? What would it return? Just type your answer in the chat. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, good job, guys. So the next thing I'm going to go over is how can we change these values in an array. So for example, if I wanted to change the 6 into a 7, I'm going to go over that right now. So by using indexes, like how I just taught you to access an index, we can use that also to change the value at that index. So as you can see, the equation is nearly the same, where I call in the variable name, I tell Java what index I want to change, and then I put in the equal sign and then value. And what this will do is Java will change like whatever number is at that index, like that element, and it'll replace its value with this new value on the right side. So here's going to be a few examples I will show. So first, you create a decimal array or an array of any type, and at these indexes 0, I'm going to change the value at index 0 to 23.6. And as you can see down here, at index 0, my value is now 23.6. And another example here is if we go to a decimal array of 4, I'm going to change that value to negative 234. And as you can see at the last index, at index 4, the element is now negative 234. So let's go into Replit, and we can do a few hands-on examples where we access the indexes and we change the indexes of an array. So get onto your Replit and just take this comment at the bottom. So this where you comment out multiple lines, delete it and bring it down to the bottom, so that we don't have to worry about any of our code from before from getting in the way. So what I can do is I'm going to create a double array. So double, yes.
So I'm following you. So can you like send your like Replit thing, so like we can like if we can't type as fast, we can use yours.
Okay, yeah. Oh, if you want me to type slower, I can type a lot slower. I'm sorry about
Okay.
that. And you want me to zoom in? Okay, give me a second. Okay, is that good? Okay, yeah. So I'll type a lot slower. Thank you for bringing that up. So I'm going to specify my data type of double, and I'm going to have my brackets right here. How do I type so fast? It's just a lot of practice. So I have my data type, my brackets, and then I have my variable name. So double array is going to be the name of my array. And then remember the equal sign and remember to put new, and then remember to bring back your data type. So here we're working with a double, so a new double, and then we're going to specify how many spaces we want. So let's say we want 5 spaces. So, and then remember to have a semicolon at the very end. So this is how we create an array, as you remember from before. So now let's change the value and access the value of some of these indexes. So we can actually print these values out too. So remember when you access an array, Java will return a value. So what we can do with that value is that we can print it out. So let's use a system.out.print. And then we can retrieve a certain index. So we can go to our variable name called double array, and then remember the brackets and type in any number from 0 to 4. And you don't want to type in 5, even though there are 5 spaces, because the last index is not a 5. The last index is a 4, because remember, Java starts at 0. So let's access the value at index 0, and remember a semicolon at the end. And then run your code, and we should get 0.0. Yep, so Java will return is 0.0 because we have a double array created with the default value of 0. So to show what that looks like, I'm gonna draw it out a little bit. So we have our array called double array, and then we have like, and there's five values in this array. So imagine that there are 5 boxes. So we have 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So these are 5 boxes, index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And these are all created with the value 0.0. I'm just going to put in 0 because I'm having trouble putting in the period. So what I'm doing right here is I'm calling in the value at index 0. So what this is going to do is it's going to retrieve the value at this index. And the value at this index is 0.0. And as you can see right here, Java will print out 0.0. So that's how you would print out an index. I'm going to go over a few more examples of printing out at a certain index. So let's do another system.out.println, and then we can print at index 4 this time. And as you would suppose, it will print out 0.0. Oh, sorry. Yep, as you can see, it printed out 0.0. So here, I'm printing out an index 4, so it's going to go to index 4 and retrieve the element called 0.0, and it's going to print it out to the user. So that's how you would retrieve the value at a certain index. Now let's figure out how we want to change that value at a certain index. So remember how we would remember like the formula I gave earlier? It's literally the same thing, except you put an equal sign and whatever your new value is. So we have double array. So this is our variable name, and we want to specify what index we want to change. So here I want to change index 0, and I will put the equal sign, and I'm going to put in the new value I want. So 23.4, and that will be the new value for index 0. So let's once again retrieve the value at index 0. So system.out.println, and we want to retrieve the value at double array of 0. So I'll give people some time to type that out while it's running. And as you can see, it will print out the value of 23.0 because I changed the 0th index. So let's go back to my master art. Let's just delete this. I changed that value to 23.4. And now I'm retrieving the value of 23.4 at index 0. So hopefully that explains how to change the value at a certain index and how to print it out. And I would like to go over more examples if we have more time. So I'm just going to go on to the next section because I hope I covered it well enough. Okay, so here we went over the slide already. And I already went over this. So, oh, actually, no, I did not go over this. So here, remember how we can print out variables? Let's try printing out an array in Java. So basically, you remember you print out variable name and then semicolon. So what I want to do right now is I want to try printing out this decimal array. So let's go back to a replit and let's print out the array. So system.out.println double array. And what do you guys expect for it to print out? You would expect it to print out the actual like array, but if you were to print it out, you get something weird. If it can load, yeah, you would get this, and this might not make any sense at all because like no one knows what this is like at first glance. So let me go back. So it prints out random letters. Sometimes it'll print out this this beforehand, java.lang.string. Don't worry about exactly what it means. Just understand that Java is weird. So, but the realistic answer is that Java will print out the memory location of that array. And you don't need to worry about what that means. Just understand you can't print out an array because Java is going to be weird. So, and no one cares about what this means. So let's figure out how to actually print an array. So realistically, we could do, remember how I taught you guys how to retrieve the value at a certain index, we can do that. We can retrieve at index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4. We can go on. But what if you're given an array of length 1000? How would you would spend 1000 lines of code just to print out that array? And that's, I mean, no one wants to do that. So there's gonna be another way that we could do it, which Kanishk will cover shortly. But when you print out an array, you're gonna get this weird code, like weird output. And what we could do is print out each individual index, but that's not what we want to do. And an efficient method would be to use loops. And I'm gonna teach another way that you guys could print out an array. Yeah, so just understand, don't want to print out every index. And we'll be going over loops shortly, but I'm gonna teach you guys a shortcut to print out these arrays without having to use loops. So you're given an array, and remember how Ishan was teaching you guys that string is a class? So like string is a class, okay? Like, and that class has methods such as like string.length. Like you would call your string and you would take the length of it. Similarly, Java has like some kind of other classes where we could use similar methods. And what one of the methods can do for arrays is retrieve the length of the array. So we're gonna do something a bit special. We're gonna be using something called a library. So what a library is like, it's Java's pre-built code, which you can use its methods in those pre-built libraries. That might sound a bit confusing, but I'll just be showing the hands-on example, and hopefully you can follow along. So go to line 2, or go to the very beginning and press enter, okay? And at line 1, what I want you to type in is it util.arrays, Ishan?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah, so what you want to type in is, one second, I'm gonna paste that code in the chat. Import java.util.arrays. So what we're doing here is we're importing in code, like someone else could have written this code and we're using their code, okay? And what this will do is we will use it to print out an array. So what this java.utils.arrays is it's that specific library that gives us these functions such as like string dot, like for example, you have string class. You are given a method called string.length. That could be like some of those predefined methods. And we're going to be using those methods. And one of these methods can print out to us the entire array. And if it seems confusing, I can explain it again, but I just want you guys to understand like the general concept of importing libraries to use methods. So I'm going to show you guys now how to print out the array. So system.out.println. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the arrays class that I just imported. So arrays dot toString. So, and then I'm going to, inside that toString, I'm going to call in my variable name. So a variable name that I have is double array. And then semicolon at the end. And this is what it would look like. So I'm going to paste this in chat because I went over this really quickly.
And this should look kind of similar because we covered integer.toString, double.toString. So this is like that.
Yeah. And if you were to print this out, it's going to print out the entire array. So let me show. So remember, our index 0, we changed it to be 23.4. And then the rest of it will be 0.0. And this is kind of what it would look like. But Kanish is going to go over another way of printing out these arrays, and he's going to be going over another topic called loops. So before we continue on, does anyone have any questions about what we covered? Just to recap, just make sure you understand why we want to use arrays.
Did we cover arrays.length?
Arrays, should I cover that?
Yeah, like double array.length really quickly if you want.
Okay. So in an array, let's say you create an array, but you just for some reason forgot how long the array is. And this will be useful in a little bit. Actually, I'd rather Kanish cover this, if that's fine.
Oh yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. sorry, I'm gonna just recap quickly about everything. So understand why we use an array. We use arrays to store a collection of data. And the way that we would create an array is this formula. Brian, if you would link your replit and an officer can check it out. And same with the, so someone else linked their replit to me privately. I can't check it out right now. So please just link it in publicly so that another officer can look at it. So remember that we create an array using the data type, a variable name, and then we specify how many elements we want. And that when we create an array with a certain amount of elements, there's going to be that many elements in the array, and it's going to be of that data type. And remember
Wait,
that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. So like when we make an array, like if we don't change anything, will the numbers in the array unchanged will always be like 0.0 if it's a double,
Yeah.
or
It will
0
always.
if it's in, or something like that?
Yeah, that is correct. If you don't change it ever, it will keep the default value. So to recap, these are the default values. Remember, null means no reference, also nothing, like literally nothing. And remember that how to access a element in an array that we would call the index. So, and remember Java starts counting at 0. So here, if you want to access index 3, we would do decimal array at index 3, and this would give us -1, 2, 3, 5. I'm going through this really quickly because I covered it really in depth, so I don't want to spend too much time on it again. So yeah, remember this is the formula. You would give your variable name and you would provide the index. And here are a few examples. Number array of 0 would return 7. Number array of 9 will give me an error because there are only 8 indexes. And yes, we will send the slides through an email, just like how we did yesterday. So we will send the slides after class. And for adjusting array values, remember, we would call in the array at a specific index and then equal it to a value. So remember these examples, that's our variable name is right here. We have our index and then we have our actual value that we want to change it to. So before 0.0, now it's going to be 23.6 because I changed the value at that index. And yeah, remember printing out an array is a bit weird, and that we could print out every index, but printing out every index is not ideal. And we can import in this library to print out the array for us. So that's a quick recap of what I just went over. Does anyone have any questions before we continue on?
I have a question for how to print an array.
Yes.
So when you print array, do you put array.toString to double array or any of that? Or
So,
do you
so if I'm understanding correctly, what you want to have is you want to have this, like this is going to be the same every time. Oh, actually, let me make a comment right here. So you would have arrays.toString, and then you would have your variable name inside. Does that make sense? And what this will do is what the toString method of the arrays class will do is it will give you every value and it will separate it by a comma. So as you can see, this is the value. This is like every specific index and its value in my array called a double array. And the way that you would use this toString method is using arrays.toString variable name. I'm going to go over another.
And then makes it a string so you can print it out properly.
Yeah. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create another array just to give us more practice with using this arrays.toString method. So int, or let's use string this time. So string array equals new string. And then we can give it 3 place values. I'll give you guys like 15, 20 seconds to type that out before I continue on. So this would create an array of strings with 3 place values. So index 0, index 1, index 2. Now I'm going to print out that string. So system.out.println, and then remember arrays.toString, and then we have our variable name. So here our variable name is string array. And at the very end, we have a semicolon. And if you were to print it out, it's going to print out null 3 times if I'm not wrong. Yep. So as you can see, it printed out null. So That's basically how to use arrays.toString. Does that better clarify the toString method?
Like,
Okay.
what would you change null? Like, if you wanted to change it on a string, well, like what would you change null? Like, what could you change null to?
Oh, okay. You can change null into any string. So I can show an example of that, which I didn't cover earlier. So remember how we would retrieve a value? So let's just retrieve the value at index 0. So string array of 0. And then when I run my code, it's going to give me null because, as you recall, the default value for a string is null. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the value at index 0 to an actual string. So string array of 0 is equal to hello. You can name it anything you want. And when I run my code now, at index 0, it's going to be called hello with an exclamation mark. So as you can see
But
right
like,
here.
how would that happen? Like on a boolean? Like, what could you change it on a boolean?
It works
Okay.
the same way for any data type. You just say the variable name, the array name in this case, you put the brackets, the position equals whatever value. So Booleans can only have true or false values. So if you had a Boolean array called array, you would say array of 0 equals false or array of 0 equals true.
Oh, okay.
Can I go over an example with booleans, or is that not enough time?
Yeah, I could do a quick example.
Okay, so let's do an example with booleans. So we remember data type is called boolean, brackets, boolean array equals new boolean, and then we have the number of values we want. Let's say we want 23 values, okay? I don't know if there's a limitation to how long your array can be. Just don't make it too long to where your Java code will take like a year to run your code because it's just too much. So now that we created our Boolean array, let's print out our array to see what we have before. So system.out.println arrays.toString, and our variable name is called Boolean array. And then remember at the very end, we want to have our semicolon. So I went a bit fast right there. Arrays.toString parentheses. Within these parentheses, we would have the name of our variable. Oh, I misspelled toString. Thank you. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so that's how you spell toString. And yeah, you would have your variable name inside these parentheses. And when we run our code, we should get false 23 times. Yep, so it's gonna be false, 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 false 23 times. And what we can do is we can change the value of these falses to something else. So let's do Boolean array of index 16 is equal to, it can equal to true. And note, there are no quotation marks. It's just true, or I would type in false. That's what I would type, okay? And then let's type in this toString method again. So system.out.println arrays.toString Boolean array. And then we can see what has changed. So as you can see, you see this true that's right here. That is what has changed from before. So before we had falses, here we have our trues back right here. And I hope I covered everything about arrays. Yushan, Kanishka, am I missing anything?
No, I think it's good.
Yeah, okay. So Kanishka will go over the next part called loops. So Kanish, you can share your screen for that. And if you guys have any questions before we continue on, just please ask now, because we're going to be building upon our arrays.
Yeah, so am I muted? No, I don't.
Okay, Brian, I can look at your question.
Or I think I got Brian, unless he has something else.
Oh, okay, never mind.
So now loops. So first, a loop is if you want to run like the same code multiple times. So like Madhu said, maybe you want to print every number in an array, or you want to print like hello world like 100 times if you want to do that. So if you want to do like a same task again and again, you would use a loop. So let's look at the structure of a loop. So this is a for loop, and in a for loop, you have a for, and then you have these parentheses. So in the parentheses, you first need to initialize a variable, and then you need a condition. Like this condition is when the for loop will stop. And then you need a change that will change the initial variable. So this will make more sense in a second. So the initial variable, let's call it I, and it's usually an int. So let's say int I, we initialize it as 0. Like I think Madhu talked about initialization declaration. We're initializing I to 0. And then we have a condition. So this has to like evaluate to a Boolean, true or false. So like while this condition evaluates to true, the loop will run. So while I is less than 10, the loop will keep going. And as you can see at the beginning, I starts out at 0, and 0 is less than 10, so this loop will start out running. And then because you don't want an infinite loop, you need to change your I. So here we're going to do I is equal to I plus 1. And basically what you're doing here is you're adding 1 to I. So this loop will repeat 10 times because the variable I, it starts at 0. It starts at 0 over here, and it increases by 1 each time until it reaches 10. So I would start at 0, then it would do the statements inside, it would increment by 1, then I would be 1, then I would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then as soon as I hit 10, 10 is not less than 10, so the condition would be false and the loop would stop. So this is for loop. And then let's like trace this a bit more. So here we have a for loop. Here you have a bracket or parentheses in which you have these 3 parts of the for loop. And then you need a curly brace. You need like these 2 curly braces, and inside will be all of the statements that you want to do. So, and just like if statements, there's not going to be a semicolon at the end. If you do that, like your code just won't work. So instead, you have curly braces, and inside you have the methods you want to do. So here, I'm going to be tracing this for loop. So at the beginning, I is equal to 0. And after I is equal to 0, we check the condition. Is the condition true? Is I, which is 0, is 0 less than 5? And that's true. So then we move on to the statements. The statement is, it's printing out I. So I is 0, so the output is 0. So after we've done this, it goes to this green part, which is like the increment. I is equal to I plus 1. So now I is 1. After we've incremented it, we check the condition again. Is 1 less than 5? And that's true. So we do the statements. We print out I, and because I is 1, we print out 1. And we keep doing that. Now we increment I again. I is 2. 2 is less than 5, so we print out 2. 3 is less than 5, we print out 3. 4 is less than 5, so we print out 4. And then finally, 5. Is 5 less than 5? No, it's not. Therefore, we don't do this blue statement. We don't do the statements inside of the curly braces, and we don't output anything. So, are there any questions? Okay, on the next slide, I have a cool little flow chart. And basically, at the beginning, you initialize the variable, which is I, and then you check the condition. So the condition here, it's I less than 10. If that condition is true, then we do the statements that are inside the curly braces. And then after we do the statements, as you can see if you follow the arrows, we increment or decrement. So here we're increasing I by 1. And another way of saying this is I++, but I'll show you that in the code. Yeah, this stuff's in the code. And after we increment, again, we go back to condition. If the condition is still true, we do the statements. If it's false, the for loop is over. So I'll just give you guys like 30 seconds to admire this flow chart and figure out exactly how it's working. I did not make this. Stole it off the internet, whatever. So now we're gonna go into Replit and I'm going to start coding. So let's say we wanted to print hello world like 10 times. So what we would do to do that is we would first write our for and do our brackets or our parentheses. The first step is initialization. So we would initialize I to 0. Then the next step is what condition do we want this to stop at? Oh, you want to zoom in? Okay. Okay, that should be better.
Could you please share your Replit?
Yeah, here you go. And you can just always refresh the Replit to get like my changes on there. So we're going to start off in I at 0. Then we're going to do our condition. So we want this to run as long as I is less than 10. And each time we want to increase I by 1. So there's two different ways to do this. You can either do I is equal to I plus 1, but like this other way will show up in the Kahoot. So just know it means the same as I is equal to I plus 1, and that is I plus plus. Okay. So, but for now, we'll just do I is equal to I plus 1, and then your curly braces. So I'll just like make a comment and say I plus plus. It can also be I plus plus. So what statement do we want to do? Can't you also do plus equals? Yes, you can. But I just, So now we want to do system.out.println, and we said we wanted to print hello world 10 times. So we can do hello world. So what this will do is it will print it 10 times because it goes from 0 to 10. And here we go. We printed out hello world 10 times. So what if we want to, let's say, print out I 10 times? What if we want to print the numbers from 0 to 9? Oh, you want to slow down? Okay. So, okay, I'll just give you guys like 20 seconds to copy this code.
Hey, just a quick tip. If you're having trouble keeping up in terms of typing and you're really far behind, if you refresh Kanishk's link that he sent in the chat, all his changes will show up, so you can just copy and paste it. But if you also want to type it, you can do that as well.
Asking, is there a limit for this? I mean, if your program runs for too long, like Java might time out.
Yeah, so
or it'll just
you
keep
can go to
running.
like about a billion in a second or a little longer. But if you start going to really large numbers, you'll see that, yeah, like Kanish said, it'll time out. It'll just keep on running.
Yeah. So now let's say we want to print the numbers from 1 to 10. Where's the link? I'll post the link. Okay. So each time the loop runs, I is increased by 1. So in the first iteration of the loop, I is 0, then it becomes 1, and then it just keeps increasing until I is 10 and the loop stops. So if we print I each time, what should we get? Is it practical to put a loop inside of a loop?
Yes, it's very much practical. We won't be covering that too much today, but yes, you'll definitely see that a lot in code for multiple reasons.
So, so this printed out 0 to 9 because I started at 0, and as soon as I hit 10, the condition was no longer true, so it did not print out 10. But we want to print out all the numbers from 1 to 10, not 0 to 9. So how we would do that is we can change this initial condition. Instead of starting I at 0, we can start I at 1. And instead of stopping I when it hits 10, we can stop it when it hits 11. So instead, we get the numbers from 1 to 10. That's that. And now I'm going to go back to the presentation for a bit. Because Madhu, he was talking about how to loop through an array and how you want to print an array without using toString. So how you would want to loop through an array is you would do the same thing, like I is equal to 0, but for the stopping condition, you'd set it as array.length. And what array.length does is, array is the name of your array variable, and it will just return you the length of that array. So let me just show you this in Replit. I'm gonna comment out this first code with the long comments, and let's create an int array. So let's say int array is equal to new int, and let's make it 10 long. So if we were to do system dot out dot println, and we would, to get the length of this array, which is this number, what you would do is you would do the name of the array. So the name of this array is int array dot length. So int array dot length, and that would give you the length of this array. So that should output 10 because that was the length of the array. So if we want to loop through this, we can again make a for loop. So we can do for, and we start we initialize a variable here. And it does not have to be I. You can call it whatever you want. So in this case, we're looping through an array. So let's call it index. So we're going to start index at 0 because arrays also start out at index 0. And we want this to run while the index is less than the length of the array. And to get the length of the array, you would do the name of the array dot length, like we demonstrated up here. It would get you the length of the array. And yeah. So we have our initialization and we have our condition. Now we just need to do our increment. So like I said up here, you can either do like index is equal to index plus 1, or you can do index plus plus. So this time I'll use index plus plus because like this way of writing it will show up on the Kahoot and it just increases index by 1. And then after we'll have our curly braces. Inside we'll have all of our statements. So what do we want to do now? Let's say we want to print every single element in the array. So we first need our system.out.println. And okay, let's remember, how would you access an element in an array? What you would do is you would do the name of the array, and then you would do brackets, and inside the brackets, you would put the index of the element you want to get. So the index, let's say we want to get index 5, we'd put in 5. So now, each time index is increasing by 1. So if we want to print out the value of int array at each index, we simply need to access it at each index and print it out. So to access it, we would do the name of the array, and then the brackets, and what index we want to get. Well, the variable we're incrementing is called index, so we're going to put index in there, and then semicolon. So what this will do is it will print every index, the value at every index in int array. So if we run this, see it printed every value in int array. That's 10 zeros because when you make an int array, everything is set to 0. So just to prove to you guys that it is working, we can maybe set, let's set the 5th index 10. So now the 6th number in this list, or the 5th index, should equal to 10. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So right here, we should get a 10, and we got a 10. So that's how you would print out, that's how you would loop through an array. Are there any questions, or does anyone need more time?
I think I need a little bit more time.
Okay. Okay. I'll just paste the link again. And Madhu talked about what would happen if you tried to access an index that didn't exist. So even though this thing's length is 10, the biggest index it has is 9 because indexes start counting at 0. So what would happen if we tried to access the index at 10? So as you can see, Replit is also already giving an error. But if we tried to like say int num is equal to the index at 10, it would give us an index out of bounds error. So that's why, yeah. So now I'm going to go back to the presentation and show you another type of loop. And this is the structure of a while loop. So like a for loop, it has a condition. So like while this condition is true, it will run. So for example, while I is less than 10, this loop will run. And the structure of a while loop, as you can see, is the same diagram. So it's while this condition is true, the statements will be executed, and you have to put the statement to change the condition yourself. So the while loop does not have that increment decrement built in. Instead, it's like a continuous loop, and you have to change the condition yourself. So let me give an example of this. Let's say we wanted to do the same thing, which is printing out every element in the array, but we wanted to do it with a while loop. What we would do is we would first like initialize the number by ourselves. Let's say int j, or first, before we do that, let's comment out our previous code so it doesn't get in the way. Let's say we wanted to print hello world 10 times, but this time we want to do it with a while loop. So to do that, you first need to make a counter. So let's say int counter is equal to 0. And now we can do our while loop. So while counter is less than, now here you can choose how many times you want to run the loop. So while the counter is say less than 10, and again, like in for loop, if and the if statement, you don't do a semicolon here, and you have to follow it with these curly brackets. So while a counter is less than 10, we can do system.out.println, and then in strings, hello world. However, we're not done yet. If we do this, then it'll just print a bajillion hello worlds. Okay? And that's because we didn't do the increment part. This is an infinite loop.
Be careful about doing that. Can make your computer fan like run really quick.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of the best ways to get your laptop nice and toasty because it's really cold outside.
Yeah. So you don't want an infinite loop, okay? And that's happening because here you made counter, and here you did it while counter is less than 10, this will run. But you never changed counter. So counter will always be less than 10, and hello world will print like infinitely. So how you change that is you remember to put in the statement to change the condition. What happens if we do that again? Something crashes. That's what would happen. So instead, we let's say we increase counter by 1. So counter is equal to counter plus 1. And that will only print it 10 times because we're increasing counter. So does everyone understand while loops? Is there anything I should go over?
Brian's code crashed.
Get?
You should give everyone a minute or two. Let them refresh it.
Okay.
Yeah, be very careful about running into an infinite loop because if you're working on another place that's not REPL.it, like that place might not be as nice about infinite loops compared to REPL.it, because I know REPL.it will time out after a while, whereas other websites might never time out, and you might your computer might just crash off of it. So be very careful about that.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing though is because REPL is running it on another server, your laptop won't get nice and toasty. We'll cover some software you can install tomorrow so that you can get that free heater.
Yeah, but it would kind of destroy your computer.
Not
Not really destroy
it.
it, but it would crash it.
Yeah, it might just crash whatever program you're using to write the code.
Yeah, but then you could just go on it again and do it again.
Yeah. So anyways,
Yeah, coming back to the topic now.
yeah. So this is a while loop, and as you can see, it's not really that much different from a for loop. It's just that the for loop initializes and updates by itself, like it's built in, but a while loop, you're responsible for that. So you could also do different things with the while loop. So let's maybe make a array, or yeah, let's make an array. So let's call it an int. Yeah, let's make an int array called r, or let's call it int array. And it's equal to a new int. And let's make it 6 long. So we can set the counter at 0, and we can say while count, if we want to loop through this array, what would the condition here be? Type into chat, what should the condition here be if we want to loop through this entire array and not get an error? The question is, what should the condition inside this while, what should this condition be if we want to loop through this array so that we don't get an error in our program? Yeah, it's not less than 7. Let's try less than 7. So if we do less than 7, and let's say we want to print the array, we want to print the array at the index of counter. If we do that, we will get an index out of bounds exception. So it will print the first 6 times, but then it's going to try to access the int array at index 6. And it does not exist. Nothing exists at index 6 because it starts counting at 0. So you got this error. So instead of 7, it should be 6. And we don't like just writing arbitrary numbers. So what that 6 actually represents is the int array dot length. So yeah, it's always nice to put variables so that you know what your code is. Now if we do it this time, we'll print out everything and there won't be an error. So let's say instead of let's do something else. Let's say that we want it to be while that int array dot length, while the counter is less than int array dot length, and let's make a boolean outside. Remember booleans, they can be either true or false. Let's say boolean found is equal to true, or is equal to false. Okay, let's set it to false. So what we want to do is, let's say we want to look through the array and see if there's any 5s in the array. So if there's a 5 in the array, then we want to stop the loop. So if we want to do that, what we can do is, or should I talk about this, Madhu?
Yeah, you could do that because it extends based off what I talked about yesterday. It's a good
Yeah.
refresher.
Yeah, this is a good revision of everything. So, okay, let me write what we want to do. What we want to do is we want to print all of the, yeah, okay, fine. I'll finish this up in like 5 minutes. We want to print all of the numbers in the array until there's a 5 in it. Until there's a 5 in the array. Like as soon as you come across a 5, you want to stop until there's a 5. So what we can do is we can have a counter. So, okay, this counter,
Okay, so Arnav, we can do a quick review of the while loops after Kanishk is done explaining what he's doing because it's kind of a lot to go over again. But the while loops are not in the Kahoot. In that respect, you're fine, but Kanishk will review it after he's done teaching whatever he's doing now.
Okay.
so we want this while loop to continue while the number is not found. So basically what we'll do is we'll do an if statement inside the while loop. So if the number, so if the number at counter, if int array at counter is equal to 5, then I'll give you guys a couple seconds, or I'll paste this in chat after I type it. So if the number at that counter index is equal to 5, then what we want to do is we want to set found equal to true. And we want to stop this loop when found is true. So how we do this is we can add another condition inside here. So we want it to stop if there's no more numbers in the array, and we want it to stop when found is equal to true. So found starts out as false, and it becomes true when we find it. So if found is false, this while loop will never run. So instead, we can do one of the operators we discussed yesterday, which is not. So this while loop will run while the counter is less than the array's length. So while there's still numbers in the array, and while 5 is not found. So if we run this right now, it should run the same as before. But let's say we set int array at index 2 equal to 5. Then if we run it, it will print out the index at 0, the index at 1, and the index of 2. But because found is true, found will be true here, and then it will stop the loop. So I'll just paste this code into chat and also paste the link. And now I'll take any questions you have about this. there's no questions, I think I'm just gonna review the structure of a for and while loop one last time.
When you explain the while loop, can you go a bit more in depth? Because I think some students were confused with that, especially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the while loop, it follows like the same like flow chart as a for loop, except okay. So you have a while, and while the condition inside these parentheses is true, this while loop will keep running. So as like compared to a for loop, you have the condition over here, where it will keep running as long as that condition is true. So instead, and the for loop also provides you a place to initialize a variable and increment the variable. So just instead, in a while loop, you have to do like the initialization and the incrementing on your own. So this can be useful in and it'll be useful in the future, but for now, you should be fine with the for loop. Do we want to do the Kahoot now?
Oh,
Yep.
I have to explain the homework. Just can you give me a
Oh
minute?
yeah, yeah, Madhu, go ahead.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just gonna finish up Brian's question. I'll explain the homework.
Okay.
If anyone else has other questions, please type it out in chat. Okay, I think I covered everyone's questions, so I can go over the homework.
Okay.
Yeah, give me a second. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, oops, present. So for today's homework, just remember the purpose of homework is for you to apply what you learned in class today. It's not meant to be busy work. It's meant to just give you a refresher of what we did in class. So for today, a meteorologist is given many temperatures for the next upcoming days, and he wants to find out how many of these days are going to be cold. And the condition for if it's going to be cold or not is if the temperature is less than 50, the meteorologist will consider the day to be cold. And if he thinks 50 degrees is cold, then he's probably living in Texas. Okay. So create a program that'll take in the meteorologist's list of temperatures and then output back to him how many days are cold. And I will post this Replit link in the chat. Oops. Okay, so this is the Replit link. So everyone just, let's go to this Replit link together and I'll teach you how to copy it. And I'll explain everything that's in here. I don't remember what yesterday's homework was. I kind
I
of
think
forgot already.
for the homework, are we hard coding the array?
No, I give them the array.
randomly.
It was
Yeah.
the letter grade one.
Yeah, so that's a good question. For this homework, it's not going. There's not going to be any user input. Madhu's randomly generating the grades or the temperatures.
So to explain what's going on here, so at line 15, you are given int temperatures as an array. And what this array will do is when you run your code, it will print out, what's going to happen is it's going to print out an array of size 10. As you can see, I have an array of size 10. And what will happen is there's going to be random numbers in each spot. So you can check your code multiple times without having to retype up your array over and over again. And out of these 10 numbers, I want you to figure out how many of these days are considered cold. And remember, the condition for that is if the temperature is less than 50. So here, let's if we go through this example. We have 1 day that's cold, 2 days that are cold, 3 days that are cold, 4 days that are cold. And what you want to print out is just print out the number of days that are cold. So here, you're going to use this array called temperatures. And remember this because I was looking through some of the submissions of yesterday's homework, and some people were using their own variables. Please don't use your own variables because nothing's going to happen if you use your own variables. Please use this variable that's given to you to do your homework today. And when you want to test your code, just press run, and you don't need to input in any, like, you don't need to tell the console anything. It's automatically generated for you. So just print out to the console using a system.out.println how many days are cold using the condition. 50 is not cold. Because I said less than 50, it means that 50 is not cold itself. So that's our homework. We're going to be using arrays. So that's what I'm trying to test your knowledge on. And the point of the homework is to review what we learned. And there's going to be one more homework. I hope to not like be giving too much homework, but I feel like this is really important. And I hope it's also kind of fun when you do the homework. So here, Leslie is interested in how many vowels A-E-I-O-U she types up in her words. And don't ask why, okay? So just create a program that'll take in the input and output back to the user how many vowels there are. Yeah, Leslie's very weird. And the link for that is also down here. So I will paste that in the chat too. And I forgot to cover the way that you want to create a fork. If you were to copy the homework, there should be a button called fork around at the top. Press that button, and then what will happen is that it will create a copy of this into all the code for you. And then you can edit it on your own. And yes, you will get an email like last homework. And yeah, there will be a recording with the slides also.